Good afternoon. My name is Amy Forehand, and I will be presenting my project titled Hearing the Unheard Voices, a look into the Native American perspective in first grade social studies. According to Smith, Stumpf, and Cole 2012, the U.S. has more than 560 federally recognized tribes within the United States. Non-Native people often try to lump all of these different peoples together with the term Native Americans or American Indians, when in reality they're all different with vibrant cultures and unique languages, histories, and people. For the sake of this presentation, I will try to use the tribe names when possible. However, for lack of better terms, I will use the phrases interchangeably, acknowledging full well that there are shortcomings with these terms. Why is this topic important? Georgia is a state that is diverse in its racial and ethnic makeup, yet our curriculum for its students does not reflect the many diverse cultures and perspectives of its students. Standards for Georgia social studies represent a Eurocentric point of view, and what's more alarming is that many cultures are not taught at all, except when that particular race or culture interacts with the European settlers or white early Americans. This presentation aims to shed light on ways to enhance and broaden the first grade curriculum for young learners of American history, the people, places, and events that may not make it into the textbooks. Let's pause for a minute. And when you look at this picture, what are the first things that come to mind? You might have thought of things like explorers, settlers, westward expansion, etc. And while none of these associations are wrong, they only offer one side of the story. The Gwinnett Standards, or the AKS, include Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea. Read about and describe the life of historical figures in American history. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark with Sacagawea Exploration. Describe how historical figures in American history were influenced by his, her, time, and place. American Frontier, Lewis and Clark, and Sacagawea. Describe how the historical figures in American history display positive character traits of fairness, respect for others, respect for the environment, courage, equality, tolerance, perseverance, and commitment. Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea. Fairness, respect for others, respect for the environment, conservation, courage, equality, tolerance, perseverance, and commitment. Part 1 shows the typical approaches that teachers might use to teach these standards. Teachers Pay Teachers is a popular resource in which teachers are able to download different activities that are created by and for other teachers across the country. Some of the units on Lewis and Clark include reading passages, graphic organizers, timelines, and writing prompts, such as, if you were asked to go on the Corps of Discovery, what would you bring with you and why? The American Heroes books are provided by the schools and focus on Lewis and Clark and only have a small section describing Sacagawea's contributions to the Corps of Discovery. Many teachers love to read about Seaman by Gail Langer-Kowalski and Seaman's Journal by Patricia Eubank. These stories chronicle the dog Seaman through his perspective. BrainPop Jr. is another very popular site among teachers that provides short, age-appropriate videos on many different subjects. When I searched for Lewis and Clark, I noticed there was no video for Sacagawea. It does mention Sacagawea as a translator and that she helped to get horses from the Shoshone tribe for Lewis and Clark. Pebble Go is an online research library for younger students. When searching for Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea was not even mentioned as a related article for suggested further reading. Pebble Go does have its own page for Sacagawea if you search for her or American Indians. There are 13 other American Indians of various tribes and different moments in history. Part 2, I will go through and explain what's missing from the narrative. The history of Native Americans dates back thousands of years, but descriptions of America often begin in 1492. Invisibility in the curriculum is a persistent theme that is only now being addressed. Smith, Stumpf, and Cole, 2012, page 61. This quote speaks to the fact that prior to 1492, there is no mention of the diverse and rich cultures of American Indian lives that lived in North America. We only teach Native American history when it fits into white American history. Sacagawea is taught because she helped Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark are the focus and the dominant story being told of westward expansion, hard work, and bravery. Sacagawea is a Native American that fit into that narrative being taught to students. There is no standard to address the American Indian perspective to colonization or a response to meeting Lewis and Clark. What's missing in the first grade curriculum is what did Lewis and Clark's journey out west mean for the over 560 tribes already living on the land? We only teach the bravery and adventures of Lewis and Clark. There is no mention at all of the Creek and Cherokee Indian tribes that lived on this land, Georgia, before Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson came with their ideas for freedom from England. It's all taught in isolation and with a Eurocentric view. The reality is, there was war and conflict between Native Americans and settlers. Every tribe reacted differently to the white Americans, and there is no mention of this in the first grade curriculum. It's important that we look at history as a connected series of events and perspectives and peoples and memories rather than isolated events. By only offering one perspective and not mentioning others, we're saying that those other people and memories do not matter, or worse, do not exist. Part 3, I'll examine what can be done better. We need to teach children about Native American culture without having interactions with white Americans. Students need to learn about the diverse and different cultures we have in the U.S. that are not mentioned in history books. The fictional book, Kaya and the Lone Dog, do a nice job of showing a little girl growing up in the Nez Perce tribe in 1764. It shows her living her life in a way that gives insight, education, and beauty to the Nez Perce tribe without any mention of conflict or interactions with white Americans. This would be a wonderful read aloud for the class. This is a true story about a little girl growing up in the Hidasta tribe living in the 1840s. The focus is on the little girl's culture and way of life. Again, it is important to teach children that there are different Indian tribes with different customs and beliefs, and not to always frame Native American history within the dominant story of white male Americans. Buffalo Bird Girl would be a wonderful addition to the classroom library and a great read aloud to illustrate this point. Sacagawea is often lumped in with Lewis and Clark. She should have her own mini unit within the Corps of Discovery. Although this is an example of how the Georgia standards have cherry-picked minority perspectives that help perpetuate the dominant white male story being taught in schools of the American settlers. To counteract that, we can teach the Shoshone culture. Sacagawea was from the Shoshone tribe, and by teaching about her cultures, educators are showing different cultures and lenses than just the traditional Eurocentric history. These books can be read aloud to show students that the effect of Lewis and Clark's expedition was relocation of thousands and thousands of people. First grade concentrates a lot on cause and effect, and by teaching Lewis and Clark in isolation, it paints a picture that is harmful, that there were no people living on this populated continent. By reading these books out loud, children can begin to see that as the white settlers moved west, the tribes that called the land home were forced off of their homes. This would be a great example of seeing living, modern American Indians as people that shape and create our American identity today. Too often when we do teach about Native American culture, it's through a past lens, like the American Indian is extinct and no longer exists. This is not only false, but very dangerous to discredit an entire group of people. My final thoughts on this project are a little complicated. Initially, I thought the biggest problem was the lack of Native American perspective in the Georgia Social Studies curriculum in first grade. However, after completing the project, I now see that by simply including Sacagawea, I am playing into a bigger misrepresentation of the Native American history. It's a good first step, however, I need to continue to educate myself and rethink how best to bring about different and authentic narratives to my students. Firstly, when schools do teach about Native American history, it is almost exclusively after 1492 and prior to 1830. There is little to no mention of American Indians before Columbus's, quote, discovery of North America, nor after displacement by white settlers. Secondly, those Native Americans that are taught are often selected and cherry-picked to support the whitewashing history of Eurocentric white America. Sacagawea helped Lewis and Clark. She is therefore seen as helpful to the white narrative and included in history books, although often as an asterisk or afterthought. Finally, schools almost never study prominent Native Americans or tribe cultures without situating it within the context of white settlers. Their accomplishments are constantly interactions between white Americans rather than being individual and separate entities. Therefore, as I finish this project, I feel I've barely scratched the surface to this very complex problem. Including Sacagawea in children's literature to illustrate the Native American perspective suddenly seems two-dimensional and stereotypical. As I said previously, I need to continue to educate myself and rethink how to best bring a different and authentic narrative to my students. Thank you very much for listening.